So good morning again. What we are going to talk about in the next 10-15 minutes is a case study of transferability of technologies. A real transfer of things. I mean, I moved here 4 years ago. I physically moved here in Vienna, to live in Austria 4 years ago, with a certain background, a certain experience. And when I came here, I looked a bit around. What can we do? What is actually needed? What is missing? And one of the things that I noticed that these technologies were not applied. And one of the exercises we tried through fundings, through research projects, research and development projects, was to implement these technologies in a case study here in Austria. Of course, one first thing we had to do is to set up a project team. And that's why I also have Laura here with me, but also some other colleagues, I see Nikolaus and some others in the room. So this was the first exercise about transferability. So I'm not telling this just to tell you the story, but when we want to talk about transfer of technologies, you need to consider a lot of elements, starting from choosing the right people, looking at the environment around you, and then elaborate on which technologies you want to use and how you implement them. I go then to the next slide. When I moved to Vienna, I was, okay, let's forget about the sun. I come from Naples, and it's going to be rainy here. It's going to be a hard life. But actually, it's not actually true. If you look at this map, in red you have areas marked in red, which are irrigated area in Austria. It's a pretty dry, we have pretty dry season, summer season, and farmers do need to irrigate their crops. So the focus of the presentation will be mainly on application and transferability of remote sensing technologies for irrigation, but the activities we do, they go beyond this case study. So looking at this map, I was somehow sort of happy. I said, okay, so what I learned before, maybe I can also apply it in this case. So I went there, looked at the different fields, the different conditions, and I say, okay, maybe we can do something. It is interesting to notice that in this area, if you look at this graph down here, the water resources, which are groundwater, are used for agriculture, but also for urban and for industrial. So there is a very high competition in between the different sectors on the water use. Just to give you an idea of the crops we have in the area, so the crop cycles, the green bars, and on the top of the green bars you see the blue bars, which corresponds to the irrigation needs of in time of the different crops we have in the area. Irrigation started a few years ago here in the area. This is a graph representing the depth of the water table, and when irrigation became more and more common, you could see a drop in the level of the water table. So there was something to do, an action to take, and one thing was to build a canal that could divert water from the Danube and somehow refill the water table in the area. And so farmers could continue using water and actually improve the use of water for irrigation. Today we also have someone from the Markfeld Canal, who is the company managing the water resources in this area. It is important to say that the canal and the area is very relevant also for recreational activities, and people are quite, they care a lot about the environment and how the farmers do, how they irrigate, how they apply fertilizer, because they know that this has an impact on the natural resources we have so remote sensing technologies was my background. Let's see how to apply them. So this is an example on the left of multi-spectral satellite image. The first slide you have, the first part is the city of Vienna, color combination using the visual band, so it's what we would see, while in the center is using the near infrared, and on the right it's one of the products that we derive, as Guido explained this morning, the leaf area index, which is a parameter describing the crops. We put a project, it's called EO for Water, funded by FFG, in 2 different steps. So we have one implementation and a follow-up to further develop the technologies.
So we think that one of the key factors for success of to implement a project like this is to work with the users. Therefore, we involved the users from the very beginning in the project and involved them in the development process during some years of application we have now. We did this in similar ways. We organized meetings, mainly at the beginning of the season, to inform the users about the existence of the system and the functioning and possible benefits. But then we worked mainly in face-to-face meetings. We visited them at home. We registered their parcels into the system, gave support, and also received feedback from them.
So this is a process that Corné was describing this morning. We need to step out from our positions, go to the field, talk to people and see what they actually need. So it was a very complex process to understand what the needs were in the area that went through this process, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, in a practical way, we did it the following. It was done the following way. In the beginning, a web GIS system was developed, which was already shown by Guido D'Urso this morning. A similar application was developed for this area, and we registered the parcels of the users into the system, which was the delivery of the product to the user. Then the users they irrigated the fields during the summer as they wanted, and after the season they gave us feedback on how they used the system, what problems they had, and possible improvements, which we could use then to deliver an even better product in the next season. 2014 then.
Yeah. So by now you probably understood that Laura has been the key person in talking to farmers. So she has been the main contact. Here you see a picture of the team. So myself, Laura, and Nikolaus was the team, and also a picture.
Yeah, we also involved local stakeholders. For example, well, here's a picture of local stakeholders and the project team during one of our meetings with the farmers in front of the Maichfeld Canal.
And of course, working with users is not the only thing we should think about, but also what was important for us is to have a background help for technological support and development. Technologies, probably the microphone is off, so technologies are in place, but they often need to be adapted. So on the left, people, friends from Aerospace, they were helping us a lot, and we also had the local development team with Mateusz sitting in the back of the room to further develop technologies, in particular a mobile app that I will show you in a second. So this is Marfeld. We've seen some of the picture. It's an area of about 40,000 hectares. Of these 40,000 hectares, 20,000 hectares are regularly irrigated every year. And today, after 3 years of working with users, we cover a bit more than 10%, right? This was not updated number.
It's around 2,000 hectares, or a little bit more. Mm.
And I learned yesterday that at the end of this line, which is biking routes along the canal where people go biking, there is one of the most visited castles in Austria. So it's pretty important also for recreational purposes, as I said before. And you want to describe what we did, probably?
After delivering the product, which was the registration of the systems and the parcels into our system, the farmer irrigated, and they noted their irrigation practices. Here you see some pictures of the farmer, and they gave us technical feedback on the type of crop, on the irrigation volumes, and on the exact dates when they applied the irrigation. And we could then use this data to compare the supplied water, which was rain and irrigation, with the water demand of the crops. This is an example for a sugar beet field here.
Yeah, this was part of the validation process. And the water demand, or evapotranspiration, we call it water demand because it was easier to deliver the message. In this case, it's derived using remote sensing data. What you see here is the crop coefficients, or you can call it crop development curves, that describe how much water the the crop requires. And this is one of the examples that we gave to the farmers for irrigation. Of course, this is not just one case. The analysis was repeated for several different parcels.
Well, this is an overview of the parcels of 2013. It shows the relation between the supplied water and the potential water demand. There is this curve, this line 1.0, which means that the supplied water is equal to the potential water demand. And there are crops where this value was below 1 with the white bars. For example, in many of the sugar beet parcels, it was the case that they were irrigated below the potential evapotranspiration. But there were many other fields, for example, soya, onion, maize, or carrots, which were irrigated above the potential evapotranspiration, even up to the double amount of water of the demand.
So in the results, there is a high variability. There are some farmers are irrigating less than potential, others irrigating more. It might depend on the crop type, on the farm size. So this analysis hasn't been done yet. Those data, they refer to 2013, but we have collected many more in 2014, and we will continue working in 2015. So this initial data set will be expanded and will probably provide us a better overview of the performance of irrigation in the area, which was not the only thing we wanted to measure, right? It was also a bit more understanding the system.
Yeah, we also made a qualitative evaluation, also to understand better these technical results, but also to understand the problems the users had, the daily routines, to better integrate our system into their management practices. We wanted to know how much they pay for irrigation, which would be possible improvements to better use the system, and which benefits they experience from using our system. We learned that decision making is a very complex process, and it's based on many different criteria. The most often mentioned criteria was weather data and weather forecast. As we heard already before, many of them, I think almost everyone is using Hagelversicherung weather forecast. But there are many other criteria which are not as obvious. For example, the farmers have production contracts and have to assure a certain quality of the product they deliver. The price of seeds, for example, onion seeds, are very expensive, so they don't want to lose the initial investment they made, and irrigate onion, for example, more than other crops. Then they have certain technical capacities, so at the beginning of the season they decide where to place the infrastructure and then cannot change it flexible anymore. They're not really flexible in changing it during the season. They also manage the irrigation according to the plant treatment, so when they put pesticides on the plants, they don't want to irrigate the next day. And one of the most important criteria is the personal experience of the farmers. They learned how to irrigate from their parents, so it's already a long tradition. And they have a certain perception of the status of the crop, when does it have to be irrigated, and that's very personal and depends on the social environment of the farmer. We also asked which information they requested from the system, and the most often requested information was crop evapotranspiration, which is the water demand of the plant. So we conclude that this crop evapotranspiration can be one more component in this very complex decision-making process. Our service was provided for free, but we also asked the farmers if they would be willing to pay for the use of the system, and we received a quite positive feedback. In green you see that there's general positive willingness to pay for the system. We further split up the willingness to pay category into different values, from €1 per hectare to €5 per hectare in the system, and the majority decided that they would be willing to pay around €3 per hectare for the use of the system. And Francesco will explain us how why we proposed these values.
Yeah, it was a difficult process getting to these numbers and asking these questions. It's always a sensible matter when we talk about.
That's also why we have 32% of people not giving an answer. Yeah.
People don't want to say if they are willing to pay, because they know that we are going to charge after. That's not what we are going to do, but they know it, they perceive it. So this is just to give you an idea of how much it's going to cost if we would really put on the market. And what I want to point out in this graph is that there are two main components in such services, in the cost of such services. So one component is the extent of the area. So of course the cost, if you consider the cost in units or in hectares, it would decrease as you increase the number of users, so the hectares that are used by the service. And the other depends on the data. So this variability depends on what type of data you're going to use. And here is an example with different data types. This is probably going to be the data problem. The cost of data problem is going to be less relevant in the near future with Sentinel-2. What I want to say on this slide, probably bring it back, bring it up again during the discussion, is that for our case, considering 20,000 hectares irrigated, so this would cost around 2.5 to 4.5 euro per hectare, which is a relatively cheap cost compared to how much they currently pay for irrigation. So they have pumps on their fields, and they are either electric pumps or diesel pumps. So they buy the fuel or they pay the energy, and that's how much is usually going to cost, so between 300 and 900 euro per hectare. Without considering the cost of the pump and the time you need to go there and so on. One very important thing to say is that, yeah, it's 20,000 hectares, but once we process a satellite image, this has a very high coverage. So potentially we can cover areas which are nearby, what we call here in yellow, the test site, which is Marfeld. So with one processing, the potential to cover all the areas, it's very, very high. So I'm going to the conclusions and then spend a few minutes on a demonstration. At which stage we are now, and what else is needed to bring this pre-operational service to an operational service. I probably want to comment on some of these points, and then good.
On this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We now understood how the area works. We know which crops they're using. We know what information they're interested in, and one of our main goals was also to adapt to the reality of the farmer. So we wanted to know how we could transform the system to their working routine and to their reality, and not making them use our terms and the terms we are used to. For example, they wanted to have the unit in millimeters per hectare, whereas we initially provided cubic meter per hectare, so we changed to millimeters. And also I realized that some have really, if I write ETP, for me it's clear it's evapotranspiration, but for the farmer probably it's really not, he doesn't know what it is, so we changed the words, and I think we now reached them in their reality. So. We have,
so probably also improve communication to reach the farmers. So they were always complaining, oh, we have no time to look at the information. But then they were on Facebook, come on, then you have time. So we thought we might do things in a slightly different way and bring in an easier way, more dynamic and more easy to access way the information to the farmer. And I was laughing when I saw your picture with the guy in the tractor with the hands up, say maybe you can hand a mobile phone and look at the data while the tractor is doing what you're supposed to do. Or even better, having the data on the screen of the tractor and everything is done automatically, but that's probably the future. So what else is needed in this learning transferability process? So we are at some level of operational, so we are pretty happy with the models, with understanding the users, and we plan to do some other research and development to add additional features to what we are doing. So in this feedback process, we learn from the farmers, yeah, irrigation is one thing, but it's not the only thing we do. We also do fertilizer, weed control, and it would be nice to have all integrated together. So we have now, with Guido Alfonso, another project supporting the development of nitrogen and fertilizer. So it would be nice to integrate these two components, so irrigation and fertilizer, but also the integration integration with existing systems. We saw that farmers are already using, at least in this case, a service provided by the insurance, the crop insurance, and I'm sure they would be happy to see all integrated in one interface without the need to go on a different portal, on a different application to basically see what is called crop management or farm management. So it has to be integrated, and this is an effort that has to come from our side, but also from the people working in different areas with farmers already. So anyway, we are doing science and development. So there should be some discussion between who is doing science and who is doing application and transfer to agriculture. And of course, partnership for a full business implementation. That's all from my side. I just have a presentation, hopefully it works. It's what we are currently proposing to the farmers for looking at the data we are producing. So this is my mobile phone. It seems to work. So now you know my code, so open the mobile phone. And what we developed is an application which is still in a sort of very early stage, but works. So the farmer can connect, writes in the password, the login, and sees a list of parcels. Those now named parcel 1, 2, but basically they will have the name of the parcel. The farm can click on the parcel and can basically access the information while driving the tractor, for instance, or at dinner. And there's on the top a picture of, it's not a picture, it's a satellite image. In this case, it's crop evapotranspiration, and can look at how the field is doing. This is the latest image. Scrolling down some information on a different parameter of the field, so the field name. Sorry, this turned. So you know that it's really true. You have the evapotranspiration, the rainfall, which is one of the parameters I can confirm. This is one of the parameters in which they are mostly interested. The irrigation, this is a kind of new thing. We talk with them. We say, you are providing us some information, but we would like to participate in the process of building the results. Please let us add or deliver what we are doing, for instance, irrigation. So that's why you also see here irrigation. That's not from us, but that's a parameter that comes from the users. And then some graphs that...
And it would also facilitate our work a lot if they would enter the irrigation themselves.
Yeah. So we have some models in the background, some saltwater model that requires soil data, but also irrigation, so management. And this can be now, because of the technology availability, but also because of some willingness from the farmer side, integrated in the scientific, let's say, in the data processing and then in the data delivery. And then on the back you see, on the bottom you see some graphs that describe on the top, the crop water stress level. Of course, this depends on if we have or not irrigation volumes, and then the fraction of vegetation cover, which says which portion of the soil is covered by vegetation. By going through the different windows, just an example of how they today can deliver us information on irrigation or fertilizer, or they can, for instance, change the crop type, deliver information on when it was planted, and ideally also provide yield information, but we're a bit more skeptical on this point. And to conclude, weather forecasts, well, we are using a free service now, but it would be nice to see, instead of this free service, we are using some national or sort of more customized, locally tuned services. So that's all from our side. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It looks like a service that's very close to the users, indeed. It looks very user-friendly. What would be the conditions? You say that now you're quite close to selling, basically, the service. What would be the model for selling it? Are you thinking, you mentioned partnerships, creating partnerships, and I understand that's important for the integration of different sources of data. But in practice, what would it take? Creating a spin-off, selling this idea to an existing company. Did you think of that?
Yeah, there might be several models, and of course depends, as in all in life, on people and how we decide to approach it. There is also one thing to say: those technologies, we can call them operational, but there's always a level of science, research, and development in the background to adapt them to the most current satellite, for instance, or to the new requirements or to new model availability. So there might be an integration between some level of research behind and some transfer to more commercial application through, as Guido was mentioning today, intermediate people, consultant or farm consultant that can fully understand what we are doing, interpret them, and then transform this message in something easier for the farmer, or let's say at least in an initial phase, in advice, in support, in help to the farmer to fully integrate it into the practice. So I think that the steps can be done in a different level, depending on the level of technological level of advancement of the different users.
Is there in the room today any actor, so to speak, who would see themselves as having the capability of, on the one hand, understanding this work and understanding what goes on in the background in terms of R&D, and at the same time is close enough to the end users that they see themselves able to provide the service for the end users? Do we have such companies, public bodies? Yes? Can I get one of your microphones? Thank you.
Perhaps we can be an organization to bring this technology to the farmers in Austria. My colleagues will show in the next presentation our organization, our activities, and perhaps we can discuss after the presentation the possibilities we can do for the Austrian farmers with these new systems. Yeah?
But just to present very quickly your company so that people don't have to wait.
My colleagues will present the organization. We are from RWA Vienna. We are an organization, we are working in Lower Austria, in Upper Austria, in Burgenland and in Styria. We are directly in the market, connected to the farmers with the brand Lagerhaus. It's the brand in Austria. We have some subsidiaries in Slovakia, in Hungary, in Romania, Serbia, Croatia. These are new markets for us. We started our activities there in the last 2, 4, 5 years. And we are a wholesaler. We are a wholesaler. That means we buy plant protection products, we buy fertilizer at global players, some international producers, and bring it to our cooperatives. And the cooperatives sell it to the farmers. And perhaps this can also be a model for this irrigation system to bring this technology to the farmers in Austria, because I think for the most farmers in Austria it's a little bit too expensive to invest in a lot of new technologies. But our organization has the money and the financial power to invest in these technologies, and I think so it can be a solution that also small farmers in Austria can use these new technologies for a lower input.
Yes. So we are looking for actors who can create economies of scale, because you said that prices would also go down the more users we have. Probably the insurance companies would be another potential intermediate actor for this purpose. But I had the curiosity, how come you're not using the Met Office short weather forecast, short range weather forecast in this service?
But simple question, not yet.
Okay. So to be continued.
Hopefully in the future. We haven't discussed it yet. But,
right. So the integration direction would be for you to integrate their data rather than for them to integrate satellite data in their existing service.
Yeah. Could be one way to go, and actually one of the main difficulties we had in the last 4 years was to maintain the weather stations on the ground, which were part of our network, and it's a huge effort that it can be today replaced with data coming from models or from a network of national stations, that's also a possibility. So for us, it was not the main point, because we were aware of existing activities, existing people, and at the right time, the right moment, you can integrate them. But for us, it was more to understand the system and then integrate the different components once we were ready.
I see, I see. And for, yes, Cornes, just a sec.
Yes, I want to go back to the previous question on the, you could say, the advice, how to bring it to the farmer, and your comment also. I think in the Netherlands we also see a shift from, you could say, advice that is giving to farmers from companies like yours, instead of bringing it from, you could say, the independent state installed advice from 20 years ago. I think what's interesting in the discussion is what can be the cost of the advice. In your presentation, you showed what the cost of making the map, what it can cost. But there's also something about what can be the cost of the advice, the person that brings it to the.
Yes.
Because
they
calculations
add value to
done.
the service.
Probably you know from your internal accountings what time you can invest in a farmer to bring it to him. But it would be interesting to see some calculations on that, what the advice can cost.
Yes. And then perhaps it would go from €1 a hectare to, or 3 or 4 to, or like 8, or I don't know what the margin is you apply. But would you apply a margin to this service, or because you're a cooperative, would you only cover your own costs? How much would the price be influenced by the fact that you provide the service further on?
We discussed it together, I think, 3 weeks ago, but we have no ready business model for the farmers. And I think the most important thing is not the price. If the price for the farmer is €5, €6, €8, I think the most important thing is to give and to show the farmer some new technology advantage for his farm, to rise his efficiency. What else? Yeah. And then he will pay €15. If he can save €100 per hectare, I think for the farmers it's not a problem to pay €10 or €15. So it depends for the usage of the new technology and the advantage the farmer can buy with the technology. Yeah? I think this is the important thing for every technology, not only for the satellite, also for drones and for other technologies. They will come in the next years. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in the room? Yeah.
It relates with the marketing opportunity for these services. We have to realize, another topic we didn't discuss today, that agriculture, especially extensive agriculture, is today accused to be polluting, to be not environmentally friendly. So we should stress on this aspect and convince the farmers that if they use the right technology, they become environmental friendly. We can develop brands with a green mark. Yes. This produce has been, and this is very important, especially for European agriculture, to compete with emerging markets where they cannot assure the quality and the environmental aspects of their produce. So this is a topic we should develop.
Yes, it's not only about the quantitative benefits, but also the qualitative benefits. And perhaps a last question, and we'll leave the rest for the round table. Are there any regulatory limits on how much water users can use in Vienna, or is water for the moment in Vienna, in Austria? Or is water not a problem for the time being in this country?
Probably not the right person to answer this question, but I can tell.
Does anyone in the room perhaps know?
Well, I know that, for example, in Machfeld, the farmers don't have to install a meter, but they can just use the water they need, but they have to have a book where they note how much they irrigate, and there are certain limits for certain crops.
I see. So there are limits. So that should perhaps also be taken into account in the marketing model then.
Yeah, but these limits are not controlled. So, but
they're not controlled.
No, there's no meter. They can write it down.
Okay.
So
Good.
the other problem is the technical capacities. So since they pay for the energy, they are a bit more conscious of how much they should apply.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
in this
So
particular
it goes back to the fact that
scenario-
they need to pay for the water
Exactly,
anyway,
yeah.
and the
This
pumps.
particular
and-
scenario, it's the very cautious farmers, and they want to know how much they actually have to apply. So it's no more. It's not about controlling the limits. It's more about
Yes.
increasing the efficiency.
Yes, because I think in Campania it's a bit different. I think they have limits on how much water they can use, because water is perhaps a bit more scarce, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, but again, we'll thank you very much.